The morning sun cast long shadows across the hallway of Hillcrest Academy as students hurried to their first period classes. Among them walked Sophia Martinez, a quiet 15-year-old girl who always kept her head down and her books held tight against her chest. Her backpack, though faded and patched in several places, was always organized with every pencil and notebook in its proper place. Sophia had learned long ago to blend into the background. While other students talked about their weekend shopping trips or vacation plans, she would sit quietly at her desk, reviewing her homework one more time. She knew that her work had to be perfect because any mistake would draw unwanted attention, and attention was something she desperately tried to avoid. Mrs. Richardson, a woman in her late 50s who had been teaching at Hillcrest Academy for over 20 years, stood at the front of her English classroom arranging papers on her desk. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. She had built a reputation as a tough teacher who demanded excellence, though some students whispered that her definition of excellence seemed to depend on who was doing the work. As students filed into the classroom, Mrs. Richardson noticed Sophia taking her usual seat in the third row. The girl was wearing the same blue sweater she had worn twice already that week, paired with jeans that had been carefully mended at the knee. Mrs. Richardson frowned slightly, making a mental note before turning her attention to the stack of essays she needed to return. The assignment had been challenging. Students were asked to write a 5-page analysis of symbolism in classic literature, choosing from a list of approved books. Most students had struggled with the concept, turning in papers that barely scratched the surface of the topic. But one essay had stood out dramatically from the rest. Mrs. Richardson picked up Sophia's paper, which was typed neatly and stapled with a proper cover page. As she had read it the night before, she had been genuinely surprised by the depth of analysis and the sophisticated understanding of literary techniques. The writing was clear, the arguments were well structured, and the insights were remarkably mature for a 10th grade student. But as Mrs. Richardson looked at Sophia sitting quietly, in her worn clothes, something bothered her. How could this girl, whose father she had seen emptying trash cans and mopping floors after school hours, produce such advanced work? The disconnect between Sophia's humble background and her exceptional academic performance seemed impossible. To Mrs. Richardson, the bell rang and Mrs. Richardson called the class to attention. She began returning the graded essays, making comments about each one as she handed them back. Some students smiled at their grades, while others looked disappointed. Sophia waited patiently, her hands folded on her desk, as the stack of papers grew smaller. Finally, Mrs. Richardson reached Sophia's essay. Instead of simply handing it back, she held it up for the entire class to see. The room fell silent as all 25 students turned their attention to the front of the classroom. "Class, I want to discuss something very serious with all of you today," Mrs. Richardson began, her voice carrying a tone that made everyone sit up straighter in their chairs. "Academic honesty is the foundation of education. When students cheat or have others do their work for them, they not only hurt themselves but also disrespect their classmates who work hard to earn their grades honestly." Sophia felt her stomach drop as she realized where this was heading. Her heart began to race and her palms grew sweaty as Mrs. Richardson continued to hold her essay in the air. "This essay," Mrs. Richardson said, waving the paper slightly, "is far beyond what I would expect from someone at this level. The vocabulary, the analytical thinking, the sophisticated understanding of complex literary concepts. It's quite impressive, actually." For just a moment, Sophia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Mrs. Richardson was going to praise her work in front of the class. Maybe all those late nights spent reading and rewriting would finally be recognized. But that hope was quickly crushed by Mrs. Richardson's next words, which is exactly why I know that Sophia Martinez did not write this essay herself. The classroom erupted in whispers and gasps. All eyes turned to Sophia, who felt her face burning. With embarrassment and confusion, she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her mind raced, trying to understand how her teacher could make such an accusation. "Mrs. Richardson," Sophia finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper, "I did write that essay. I worked on it for 3 weeks. I read the book twice and took pages of notes." Mrs. Richardson shook her head with what appeared to be disappointment. though there was something else in her expression that Sophia couldn't quite identify. It was a look that made her feel small and ashamed, even though she knew she had done nothing wrong. "Sophia, I understand that you might feel pressured to perform well academically," Mrs. Richardson said, her tone taking on a patronizing quality that made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. "But we need to be realistic about expectations and capabilities." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She had heard similar comments before, subtle suggestions that her success was somehow suspicious or undeserved. But never had anyone been so direct, so public in their doubts about her abilities. "I can show you my notes," Sophia said, her voice growing stronger despite the tears that were beginning to form in her eyes. "I have all my research and my rough drafts at home. I can prove that I wrote it myself." Mrs. Richardson sighed dramatically as if dealing with a difficult child. "Sophia, your father works as a janitor here at the school. He cleans these very classrooms every evening. I see him emptying the trash cans and mopping the floors. There's no shame in honest work, but let's not pretend that academic excellence runs in families where parents haven't had educational opportunities." The silence in the classroom was deafening. Some students looked shocked by their teacher's blunt words, while others seemed uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Sophia felt as if the ground was falling away beneath her feet. "My father is very smart," Sophia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "He helps me with my homework every night. He reads the same books I do so we can discuss them together. Just because he works as a janitor doesn't mean he's not intelligent." Mrs. Richardson's expression hardened. "Sophia, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I know the difference between a student's original work and something that has been heavily assisted or written by someone else. This level of analysis, this sophisticated writing style, it's simply not consistent with your background or your previous work." "But I've been getting good grades all year," Sophia protested, feeling desperate and confused. "My work has always been good. You gave me an A on my last 3 assignments." "Those were simpler assignments," Mrs. Richardson replied dismissively. "Basic comprehension questions and short response papers. This," she waved the essay again, "requires graduate-level thinking. I'm sorry, but I simply cannot believe that you produced this work independently." The other students watched in stunned silence as their classmate was publicly accused and humiliated. Some felt sorry for Sophia, while others began to wonder if maybe their teacher was right. After all, Mrs. Richardson was an experienced educator and Sophia was just the janitor's daughter. Sophia stood up from her desk, her legs shaking. "Mrs. Richardson, please. I swear I wrote that essay myself. Every word, every idea, every analysis came from me. I spent hours in the library researching. I read articles online. I even watched documentaries about the author to better understand the historical context." "Enough," Mrs. Richardson said firmly, cutting off Sophia's desperate explanation. "I've made my decision. This is clearly a case of academic dishonesty, and I cannot allow it to continue. Sophia, please gather your belongings and report to Principal Walker's office immediately." "What?" Sophia gasped, hardly believing what she was hearing. "You're sending me to the principal?" "I'm recommending your immediate suspension pending a full investigation into this cheating incident," Mrs. Richardson announced loud enough for the entire class to hear. "I will not tolerate dishonesty in my classroom, regardless of a student's personal circumstances or family situation." Sophia felt tears streaming down her face as she slowly began to pack her books into her worn backpack. Her hands were trembling so badly that she dropped her pencil case, sending pens and erasers scattering across the floor. Several classmates started to help her pick them up, but Mrs. Richardson spoke sharply. "Leave those items alone. Sophia can manage on her own." The humiliation was complete. Sophia knelt on the floor gathering her scattered supplies while 24 pairs of eyes watched her every move. She could hear whispers starting around the room, students already beginning to spread the news of what had just happened. As Sophia stood up with her backpack slung over her shoulder, she made one final attempt to defend herself. "Mrs. Richardson, I know you don't believe me, but I promise you that I wrote that essay. I worked harder on it than anything I've ever done in school. I thought you would be proud of me." Mrs. Richardson's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "Sophia, I wish things were different, but facts are facts. Please report to the principal's office now. I'll be calling ahead to explain the situation." Sophia walked toward the classroom door, her head held as high as she could manage despite the tears on her cheeks. As she reached for the door handle, she turned back one more time to address her classmates. "I wrote that essay," she said quietly but clearly. "No matter what happens, I want all of you to know that I wrote every single word myself." With that, Sophia opened the door and walked out into the empty hallway, leaving behind a classroom full of shocked students and a teacher who was already reaching for her phone to call the principal's office. The story of what had just happened would spread through Hillcrest Academy like wildfire, but the truth behind Sophia's academic abilities would remain hidden for now, known only to a father who worked quietly in the shadows, cleaning the very classroom where his daughter had just been publicly shamed for the excellence he had helped nurture in her. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as Miguel Martinez parked his old pickup truck in the employee parking lot behind Hillcrest Academy. He sat in silence for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as he tried to process what had happened to his daughter earlier that day. Sophia had called him during his lunch break at the construction site where he worked his day job, her voice breaking as she told him about being accused of cheating and sent to the principal's office. Miguel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The familiar weight of disappointment and frustration settled on his shoulders, the same feeling he had carried for the past 8 years since arriving in this country. He had hoped that by keeping quiet about his past, by working hard and staying invisible, he could protect his family from the complications that came with being different. But now his silence had failed to protect the person who mattered most to him. He grabbed his worn work uniform from the passenger seat and headed toward the school's back entrance. The hallways were empty now, with only a few teachers remaining behind to finish their work for the day. Miguel nodded politely to Mrs. Chen, the math teacher, as she passed by with a stack of papers under her arm. She smiled briefly but didn't stop to chat. Most of the staff knew him as the quiet janitor who did his job well and never caused any trouble. Miguel made his way to the custodial closet where he kept his supplies. As he changed into his work clothes, he thought about the conversation he would need to have with Sophia when he got home. How could he explain to her that sometimes the world judges people not by their abilities or their character, but by their circumstances? How could he tell his bright, hopeful daughter that some people would always see her as less than she was simply because of who her father was and what job he did? The truth was, Miguel had been dreading this day for years. He had watched Sophia excel in school, seen her natural curiosity and sharp mind develop, and known that eventually someone would question how the daughter of a janitor could be so academically gifted. He had hoped that her teachers would simply appreciate her abilities without looking too closely at where they came from. But Mrs. Richardson had done exactly what Miguel had feared most. As Miguel began his evening cleaning routine, he started in the main office where he emptied trash cans and wiped down desks. Through the thin walls, he could hear Principal Walker on the phone, discussing Sophia's case with someone from the district office. The words academic dishonesty and investigation drifted through the door, making Miguel's stomach tighten with worry. He moved through the hallways methodically, his mind wandering back to another life, another time when things had been so different. In Colombia, he had been Dr. Miguel Martinez, a respected professor of educational psychology at Universidad Nacional de Colombia. His office had been filled with books, research papers, and eager graduate students seeking his guidance. He had published papers on cognitive development and learning theory that were referenced by educators around the world. But that life felt like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else. When the economic situation in Colombia became too difficult for his young family, Miguel had made the hardest decision of his life. He had packed their few belongings, sold everything they owned, and brought his wife and baby daughter to the United States in search of better opportunities. What he hadn't expected was how difficult it would be to prove his worth in a new country. His degree wasn't recognized here. His years of experience meant nothing without American credentials. His English, though functional, carried an accent that some people seemed to think indicated lower intelligence. And so Dr. Miguel Martinez had become Miguel the janitor, taking whatever work he could find to provide for his family. Miguel pushed his cleaning cart into Mrs. Richardson's classroom and paused at the doorway. This was the room where his daughter had been humiliated just hours before, where her intelligence had been questioned and her integrity doubted. He looked at the desk where Mrs. Richardson sat every day, making judgments about students based on assumptions and prejudices rather than evidence and facts. As he began to clean, Miguel noticed the lesson plan book open on Mrs. Richardson's desk. Curiosity got the better of him, and he glanced at the pages. What he saw made him shake his head in dismay. The lesson plans were basic, outdated, and showed a fundamental misunderstanding of how students actually learn. The reading assignments were too simple, the discussion questions were shallow, and the assessment methods were ineffective. If Miguel had been teaching this class, he would have structured the curriculum completely differently. He would have challenged the students to think critically, to make connections between different ideas, to analyze and synthesize information rather than simply memorize facts. He would have recognized that students like Sophia, who showed exceptional ability, needed more advanced material to keep them engaged and growing. But Miguel wasn't a teacher here. He was just the janitor, invisible to most people, dismissed by others, valued only for his ability to empty trash cans and mop floors. As he cleaned the whiteboard, Miguel thought about all the evenings he had spent with Sophia at their kitchen table, helping her with homework that was far too easy for her bright mind. He had watched her finish assignments in minutes that were supposed to take hours, and so he had begun supplementing her education with additional challenges. Together, they had read books that weren't on her required reading list. They had discussed complex themes and literary devices that weren't covered in her classes. Miguel had taught her how to think like a scholar, how to ask probing questions and support her arguments with evidence. He had shared with her the same analytical techniques he had once taught to graduate students. Sophia didn't know about her father's academic background. Miguel had decided early on that it was better to keep that part of his life private. He didn't want her to feel burdened by his sacrifices or to struggle with the disconnect between who he had been and who he was now. Instead, he had simply told her that he enjoyed learning and reading, and that helping her with school made him happy. But now Miguel realized that his secret had become a problem. Mrs. Richardson couldn't understand how Sophia could be so advanced, because she didn't know that Sophia's father had been guiding her education with the expertise of someone who had spent years studying how children learn and develop. Miguel finished cleaning Mrs. Richardson's classroom and moved on to the next room. As he worked, he made a decision that had been building in his mind all day. He couldn't let Sophia suffer for his choices any longer. He couldn't allow her to be accused of cheating when the truth was that she had been receiving an education that was far superior to what the school was providing. After completing his cleaning rounds, Miguel returned to the custodial closet and pulled out his cell phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Dr. Patricia Reeves had been a colleague of his back in Colombia, and she had moved to the United States 2 years before Miguel's family had arrived. She now worked as an educational consultant and had been trying to convince Miguel for years to pursue getting his credentials recognized in the American system. "Patricia," Miguel said when she answered the phone, "I need your help. It's time to stop hiding who I am." The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. Miguel explained what had happened to Sophia, how she had been accused of cheating because her work was too sophisticated for a janitor's daughter. Patricia listened with growing anger and concern. "Miguel, this is exactly what I've been warning you about," she said. "You can't protect Sophia by pretending to be less than you are. If anything, you're hurting her by not allowing the world to see the truth about her education and support system." Patricia promised to help Miguel gather the documentation he would need to prove his credentials. She also suggested that he contact the school district directly to address Sophia's situation before it escalated further. After hanging up, Miguel sat alone in the empty school, surrounded by the smell of cleaning supplies and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Tomorrow would bring changes that he had been avoiding for 8 years. Tomorrow, he would have to reveal the secret he had been keeping, not just from the school, but from everyone who knew him as simply Miguel the janitor. He thought about Sophia at home. probably crying over her homework, wondering if she really was as smart as she had always believed herself to be. He thought about Mrs. Richardson, so confident in her assumptions about what kinds of families produced successful students. And he thought about all the other children who might be underestimated and overlooked because of their parents' jobs or their families' circumstances. Miguel stood up and gathered his cleaning supplies. As he prepared to lock up the school for the night, he made himself a promise. He would no longer allow his daughter to be diminished by other people's narrow thinking. He would no longer hide his abilities or his knowledge. Tomorrow, the truth would come out, and he would fight for Sophia with everything he had learned in his years as an educator. The secret that had protected his family from complications was about to become the weapon he would use to protect his daughter's future. Dr. Miguel Martinez was about to reclaim his identity, not for himself, but for the brilliant young woman he had raised to believe that intelligence and determination could overcome any obstacle. Miguel Martinez had barely slept the night before. He sat at his kitchen table at 5 in the morning, sipping coffee from a chipped mug while staring at a manila folder filled with documents he hadn't looked at in years. His original diploma from Universidad Nacional de Colombia was there, along with his transcripts, research papers, and letters of recommendation from colleagues who had respected his work. These papers represented a life he had left behind, but now they might be the key to saving his daughter's future. Sophia was still asleep in her room, exhausted from crying herself to sleep the night before. Miguel had tried to comfort her, telling her that everything would be okay, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. For the first time in her life, his brilliant daughter was questioning her own abilities, wondering if maybe she really wasn't as smart as she had always believed. At exactly 8 o'clock, Miguel called the school district's main office. His hands were shaking as he dialed the number, and his accent seemed thicker than usual when he spoke to the receptionist. "I need to speak with Superintendent Dr. Walsh," he said. "It's about my daughter Sophia Martinez at Hillcrest Academy. She was accused of cheating yesterday, but there's information that the school needs to know." The receptionist, probably used to angry parents calling about their children's problems, tried to redirect him to the principal's office, but Miguel was persistent. "No, this needs to go to the superintendent. What happened to my daughter is bigger than just one classroom or one teacher. This is about how the district treats students based on their family background." Something in Miguel's tone must have convinced her, because she agreed to take a message and promised that Dr. Walsh would call him back within the hour. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had been superintendent of the district for 12 years. She had seen plenty of parent complaints during that time, most of them about grades or discipline issues that could be resolved with a simple conversation. But when she read the message about Miguel Martinez and his daughter's cheating accusation, something about it bothered her. She had heard Sophia's name before. The girl was mentioned in several reports as one of the district's highest achieving students, particularly in English and social studies. It seemed odd that such a consistently excellent student would suddenly resort to cheating. Dr. Walsh decided to call Miguel back personally. When her phone rang an hour later, Miguel was pacing around his small apartment, rehearsing what he would say. He had never spoken to anyone this important in the school system before, and he was nervous about whether his English would be clear enough to explain the complicated situation. "Mr. Martinez," Dr. Walsh said when he answered. "I understand you have concerns about your daughter's case at Hillcrest Academy. Can you tell me what happened from your perspective?" Miguel took a deep breath and began to tell the story. He explained how Sophia had worked for weeks on her essay, how she had always been an exceptional student, and how Mrs. Richardson had accused her of cheating in front of the entire class. But then he paused, knowing that what he said next would change everything. "Dr. Walsh, there's something you need to know about me. Something that explains why Sophia is such a good student. I haven't told anyone at the school because I didn't think it mattered, but now I see that it does matter very much." "What is it, Mr. Martinez?" "I'm not just a janitor," Miguel said quietly. "I mean, I am a janitor now, but before I came to this country, I was a professor. I have a doctorate in educational psychology from Universidad Nacional de Colombia. I've been helping Sophia with her homework every night using the same methods I used to teach graduate students." The silence on the other end of the phone was so long that Miguel wondered if the call had been disconnected. Finally, Dr. Walsh spoke. Mr. Martinez, are you telling me that you have a doctorate degree in education? Yes, ma'am, I have all the documentation to prove it. I've been cleaning the school for 8 years, but I've also been giving my daughter an education that goes far beyond what she gets in her regular classes. That's why her work seems too advanced for Mrs. Richardson to believe. Dr. Walsh felt a chill run down her spine. If what Miguel was saying was true, then the district had a serious problem on their hands. Not only had they potentially discriminated against a student based on her family's economic status, but they had also been wasting the talents of a highly qualified educator who had been working as a janitor right under their noses. Mr. Martinez, I need you to bring all of your documentation to my office today. Can you be here at 2 o'clock? Miguel agreed, and after hanging up the phone, he called his construction supervisor to say he needed the afternoon off for a family emergency. Then he woke Sophia and told her she wouldn't be going to school that day. Am I in more trouble? Sophia asked, her eyes red from crying. No, mija, Miguel said, using the Spanish term of endearment he had called her since she was a baby. Today we're going to fix this problem. Today we're going to tell the truth. At exactly 2 o'clock, Miguel and Sophia sat in the superintendent's office. Dr. Walsh was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen many difficult situations over the years. She looked at the documents Miguel had brought with him, including his original diploma with its official seals and signatures. These look authentic, she said, examining the papers carefully. But I need to verify them through official channels. Can you give me contact information for the university? Miguel provided the phone numbers and email addresses for his former colleagues, including Dr. Patricia Reeves, who was now working in the United States and could vouch for his credentials. While Dr. Walsh made phone calls to verify Miguel's background, she also began her own investigation into Sophia's academic record. She pulled up the girl's grades from kindergarten through 10th grade and was amazed by what she found. Sophia had been consistently excellent in all subjects, with teachers' comments praising her critical thinking skills, her mature writing style, and her ability to grasp complex concepts quickly. The investigation revealed something else troubling. When Dr. Walsh looked at other students' records from Mrs. Richardson's classes, she noticed a pattern. Students from wealthy families tended to receive higher grades and more positive comments, while students from working-class families were often criticized for work that seemed remarkably similar to the praised work of their more affluent classmates. Dr. Walsh called Principal Walker at Hillcrest Academy and asked him to pull Sophia's essay along with several other students' essays from the same assignment. She wanted to see for herself what had caused Mrs. Richardson to make such a serious accusation. When the essays arrived, Dr. Walsh read them all carefully. Sophia's work was indeed exceptional, but it was also clearly consistent with her previous academic performance. The writing style matched her earlier assignments, and the analytical approach was sophisticated, but not beyond what a bright student with good guidance could achieve. More importantly, Dr. Walsh noticed that Sophia's essay included several small errors and informal expressions that indicated it was written by a teenager, not an adult. A professional academic would have written more formally and wouldn't have made the minor grammatical mistakes that Sophia had made. By 4 o'clock, Dr. Walsh had spoken with 3 of Miguel's former colleagues in Colombia, all of whom confirmed his credentials and spoke highly of his work as an educator. She had also reviewed hours of security footage from Hillcrest Academy that showed Miguel and Sophia working together in empty classrooms after his custodial duties were finished. And footage was particularly telling. It showed Miguel sitting with Sophia at a desk, pointing to books and papers, clearly explaining concepts and helping her understand difficult material. But it also showed Sophia doing the actual writing, taking notes in her own handwriting and asking questions that demonstrated her genuine engagement with the material. Mrs. Martinez, Dr. Walsh said, looking at Sophia with new respect, I owe you an apology. You clearly wrote that essay yourself, and it's obvious that you've been getting excellent educational support from your father. I'm sorry that you were accused of something you didn't do. Sophia felt tears of relief streaming down her face. For the first time since yesterday morning, She believed that someone in authority actually saw her as she really was. Dr. Walsh turned to Miguel. "Mr. Martinez, I have to ask you something. Why didn't you ever tell us about your educational background? We could have been using your expertise to help our students and improve our programs." Miguel looked down at his hands, which were calloused from years of manual labor. "I was afraid," he said honestly. "When I first came here, I tried to get work as a teacher, but my credentials weren't recognized. People looked at my accent and my appearance and decided I wasn't qualified. I learned to keep quiet about my past because it seemed to make people uncomfortable. I just wanted to work and provide for my family." "But your daughter paid the price for that silence," Dr. Walsh said gently. "Mrs. Richardson made assumptions about Sophia's abilities based on what she thought she knew about your family's background. If she had known the truth about your education and expertise, this never would have happened." Dr. Walsh stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the school district's other buildings. She was thinking about how many other talented individuals might be working in jobs that didn't use their full potential, and how many students might be underestimated because of their family's circumstances. "Mr. Martinez, I want to offer you a position as an educational consultant with our district. We need people who understand both the challenges that immigrant families face and the academic expertise to help address those challenges. Would you be interested in discussing that opportunity?" Miguel looked at Sophia, who was smiling for the first time in 2 days. "Yes," he said, "I would be very interested in that conversation. But first," Dr. Walsh explained, "they needed to address the immediate situation at Hillcrest Academy. Tomorrow morning she would be visiting the school personally to resolve Sophia's case and to have a serious conversation with Mrs. Richardson about her teaching practices and her treatment of students from diverse backgrounds." "Tomorrow," Dr. Walsh said, "we're going to make sure that everyone at Hillcrest Academy understands that excellent students come from all kinds of families and that we judge people by their character and abilities, not by their jobs or their economic status." As Miguel and Sophia prepared to leave the office, Dr. Walsh had one more thing to say. "Sophia, I hope you understand that what happened to you was wrong, but it doesn't define you. You are a brilliant young woman with a bright future ahead of you. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." That evening, Miguel and Sophia sat at their kitchen table once again, but this time they weren't hiding anything. Tomorrow would bring changes that neither of them could have imagined when they woke up that morning, but for the first time in days they both felt hopeful about what those changes might bring. The morning sun was just beginning to rise when the first black SUV pulled into the parking lot of Hillcrest Academy. Dr. Walsh sat in the passenger seat, reviewing her notes one final time before what she knew would be one of the most important days in her career as an educator. Behind her were 2 more vehicles carrying district officials, legal representatives, and a team of investigators who had been working through the night to prepare for this moment. Students arriving for school stopped and stared at the unusual convoy of official vehicles. Word spread quickly through text messages and social media that something big was happening at their school. By the time the first bell rang, clusters of teenagers were gathered around the parking lot, whispering and speculating about what could have brought so many important-looking people to Hillcrest Academy. Inside the school, Principal Walker was pacing nervously in his office. Dr. Walsh had called him at 6 in the morning to inform him that she would be conducting a full investigation into the Sofia Martinez incident and that several staff members would need to be available for interviews. He had tried to downplay the situation, suggesting that it was just a simple case of academic misconduct that could be handled internally, but Dr. Walsh had made it clear that this was now a district-wide matter. Mrs. Richardson arrived at her usual time, completely unaware of the storm that was about to engulf her. She had spent the previous evening grading papers and preparing for another day of teaching, satisfied that she had handled the cheating situation appropriately. In her mind, she had protected the integrity of her classroom and sent a clear message to other students about the consequences of academic dishonesty. As she walked down the hallway toward her classroom, Mrs. Richardson noticed the unusual number of adults in suits walking through the school. She recognized Dr. Walsh from district meetings and wondered what could have brought the superintendent to their school so early in the morning. The answer came when she reached her classroom door and found Dr. Walsh waiting for her, along with 2 other district officials and Principal Walker, who looked uncomfortable and avoided making eye contact. "Mrs. Richardson," Dr. Walsh said in a calm but serious tone, "we need to speak with you immediately about the Sofia Martinez situation. Please come with us to the conference room." Mrs. Richardson felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Of course, Dr. Walsh, though I'm not sure why this requires such a formal meeting. I documented everything properly and followed all the correct procedures for handling academic misconduct. We'll discuss that in detail," Dr. Walsh replied, her expression giving nothing away. Meanwhile, across town, Miguel was helping Sofia get ready for what they both hoped would be her triumphant return to school. She had chosen her clothes carefully, wanting to look confident and dignified when she walked back into the building where she had been so publicly humiliated just 2 days before. "Are you nervous, mija?" Miguel asked as he drove her to school. "A little," Sofia admitted. "I keep thinking about what my classmates will say, whether they'll still think I'm a cheater even after everything gets explained." Miguel reached over and squeezed her hand. "Remember what Dr. Walsh told you yesterday. You are brilliant and talented, and nothing that happened changes that. Today, everyone will see the truth." As they pulled into the school parking lot, Sofia noticed the crowd of students gathered outside the building and the official vehicles parked near the entrance. "Looks like today is going to be different from normal," she said with a nervous laugh. Inside the conference room, Mrs. Richardson was beginning to understand the seriousness of her situation. Dr. Walsh had presented her with Miguel's credentials, the results of the investigation into Sofia's academic history, and security footage showing the father and daughter working together on homework assignments. "Mrs. Richardson," Dr. Walsh said, spreading the documents across the conference table, "Miguel Martinez holds a doctorate in educational psychology from a respected university in Colombia. He has been providing his daughter with advanced academic support that is entirely legitimate and appropriate. Sofia Martinez wrote that essay herself, with guidance from a father who is more qualified to teach literature analysis than most high school teachers." Mrs. Richardson stared at the documents in shock. The diploma looked official, with raised seals and formal signatures. The research papers bore Miguel's name as the primary author, and the letters of recommendation described him as an innovative educator with exceptional insight into student learning. "This can't be right," she said weakly. "He's a janitor. I see him cleaning my classroom every night. He works as a custodian because that was the job he could get when he arrived in this country," Dr. Walsh explained patiently. "His foreign credentials weren't initially recognized here, and like many highly educated immigrants, he took whatever work was available to support his family. But that doesn't make him any less intelligent or capable of helping his daughter with her education." The principal, who had been sitting quietly during this exchange, finally spoke up. "Mrs. Richardson, we also need to discuss some patterns we've identified in your grading and treatment of students from different backgrounds." Dr. Walsh opened another folder and pulled out a statistical analysis that her team had prepared overnight. "We've reviewed your gradebooks and student evaluations for the past 3 years. There's a clear correlation between students' family income levels and the grades they receive in your classes, even when their work quality is similar." Mrs. Richardson felt her face growing hot with embarrassment and anger. "That's not true. I grade fairly and objectively. I don't even know most of my students' family backgrounds." "But you knew that Sofia's father was a janitor," Dr. Walsh pointed out, "and you used that information to justify your belief that she couldn't have written advanced work. You made assumptions about her capabilities based on her family's economic status rather than evaluating her work on its own merits. The evidence was overwhelming." Mrs. Richardson had to admit, at least to herself, that she had let her prejudices influence her judgment. She had seen Miguel emptying trash cans and mopping floors, and she had unconsciously decided that someone in that position couldn't possibly be capable of guiding a student to academic excellence. While this difficult conversation was taking place in the conference room, students throughout the school were buzzing with curiosity about the unusual activity. Teachers were trying to conduct normal classes, but everyone was distracted by the mystery of what was happening. At 10 o'clock, Dr. Walsh made an announcement over the school's public address system. Attention students and staff, please report to the auditorium immediately for an important assembly. All classes are suspended until further notice. The auditorium filled quickly, with students chattering excitedly about what kind of announcement could be so important that it interrupted the entire school day. Teachers sat in the back rows, equally curious about what their superintendent needed to tell them. Sophia entered the auditorium with her head held high, though her heart was pounding. She could feel eyes on her as she found a seat, and she heard whispers from students who recognized her as the girl who had been accused of cheating. Some of the comments were supportive while others were still skeptical. Dr. Walsh took the stage and waited for the crowd to quiet down. Students and staff of Hillcrest Academy, I'm here today to address a serious situation that occurred in one of your classrooms yesterday. A student was publicly accused of academic dishonesty, and I'm here to tell you that those accusations were completely false. A murmur went through the audience as people began to realize that this assembly was about Sophia's situation. Sophia Martinez, Dr. Walsh continued, is an exceptional student who has consistently demonstrated academic excellence throughout her time in this district. Yesterday, she was accused of cheating on an essay assignment because her teacher believed that the quality of her work was too sophisticated for someone from her family background. Sophia felt her cheeks burning as hundreds of eyes turned toward her, but she forced herself to sit up straight and meet their gazes with dignity. What that teacher didn't know, Dr. Walsh went on, is that Sophia's father, Miguel Martinez, holds a doctorate degree in educational psychology and has been providing his daughter with excellent academic support. Mr. Martinez, would you please join me on the stage? The auditorium erupted in surprised gasps and whispers as Miguel walked down the aisle toward the stage. Many students recognized him as the quiet janitor who cleaned their classrooms, but now they were seeing him in an entirely different light. Mr. Martinez has been working as a custodian at this school for 8 years, Dr. Walsh explained as Miguel joined her at the podium. But before coming to the United States, he was a respected university professor in Columbia. He has been helping his daughter with her homework using the same advanced teaching methods he once used with graduate students. Miguel stepped up to the microphone, his hands shaking slightly but his voice clear and strong. I want to thank Dr. Walsh for believing in my daughter and for taking the time to discover the truth. I also want to tell all of you students something important. Never let anyone convince you that you're not smart enough or capable enough because of where you come from or what your parents do for work. Sophia is brilliant because she works hard and loves to learn, not because of who her father is. The auditorium was completely silent as Miguel continued. I kept my educational background private because I thought it would protect my family from complications. But I realize now that by hiding who I was, I may have hurt other students who were also being underestimated because of their circumstances. Dr. Walsh returned to the microphone. As a result of this investigation, we're implementing new policies to ensure that all students are judged by their abilities and character, not by their family's economic status. We're also creating programs to better support students from all backgrounds and to identify and utilize the talents of everyone in our school community. She paused and looked directly at the section where Sophia was sitting. Sophia Martinez, would you please stand up? Sophia rose from her seat, her legs shaking but her spine straight. The entire auditorium turned to look at her. Sophia, on behalf of the entire district, I want to apologize for what happened to you. You are officially cleared of all accusations, and your essay will be displayed as an example of excellent student work. I hope you'll continue to pursue academic excellence and never doubt your abilities. The applause started slowly, with just a few students clapping, but it quickly grew until the entire auditorium was on its feet, cheering for Sophia and her father. Some students were crying, moved by the injustice that had been corrected and the dignity with which Sophia had handled her ordeal. Mrs. Richardson, who was required to attend the assembly, sat in the back of the auditorium with tears streaming down her face. She would be meeting with district officials later that day to discuss her future with the school system, but for now, she had to face the consequences of her assumptions and prejudices. After the assembly, students surrounded Sophia in the hallways, apologizing for doubting her and expressing admiration for her strength. Her classmates from Mrs. Richardson's English class were particularly eager to make amends. "I always knew you were the smartest person in our class," one student said. "I should have spoken up when Mrs. Richardson accused you." "We should have supported you," another added. "I'm sorry we just sat there and watched." Sophia accepted their apologies gracefully, understanding that they had been in a difficult position and that standing up to a teacher required courage that not everyone possessed. The story of what happened at Hillcrest Academy spread quickly throughout the district and beyond. Local news stations picked up the story as an example of how hidden prejudices could harm students, but also how truth and justice could prevail when people were willing to fight for what was right. Within a month, Miguel had accepted a position as an educational consultant with the district, helping to develop programs for immigrant families and working to ensure that students from all backgrounds received the support they needed to succeed. He also began the process of getting his teaching credentials recognized so that he could eventually return to the classroom. Sophia continued to excel in her studies, but now she did so with the full support and recognition of her teachers and classmates. She had learned valuable lessons about resilience, dignity, and the importance of standing up for the truth, even when it seemed like no one believed her. The incident at Hillcrest Academy became a turning point for the entire district, leading to policy changes that protected students from discrimination and ensured that all families were treated with respect and dignity. Most importantly, it served as a reminder that excellent students come from all walks of life, and that the true measure of a person is not their job or their economic status, but their character, their efforts, and their dreams for the future.